Hi again. We're on page 103 of John Wesley Brady's This Freedom Whence. He's reflecting on the early life of John Wesley, and his summary of the first 35 years of John Wesley's life was this. Had he died in his 35th year, he would have been an unremembered man, capable, methodical, hardworking, but pedantic, legalistic, irascible, unloved and well-nigh unlovable. The most charitable tribute that could then have been paid him would have been that he was a sincere, a selfless, a heroic failure. And the next section is entitled A Transfigured Soul. After more than 2 years of disillusionment as a colonial missionary, Wesley was overwhelmed with perplexity and anguish. I went to America to convert the Indians, but oh, who will convert me? Was the agonized cry of his soul. As he sailed homeward, the hierarchical staff upon which he long had been leaning was sorely strained, if not already broken. Setting foot again on English soil, he knew himself a sadder and a wiser man. He was less sure both of himself and his ecclesiastical dogmas. The mists and fogs of defeatism and uncertainty enveloped him as a blanket. His compass, he knew, was not pointing true. His confidence in John Wesley the priest was ebbing low. But as an intrepid pioneer, still conscious of a holy vocation, he groped on and on, through haze, fog, and darkness, o'er crag and cliff, doubting not that the mountain peaks of vision might yet be scaled. And finally, in the sunrise of a glorious spiritual morning, the fogs were lifted, the mists were dispelled, the heights were attained. Wesley, elevated now to the pinnacle of spiritual experience, breathed pure, fragrant air. Alone before the Holy One, he stood, and there a live coal from heaven's altar purged his dross, illumined his understanding, and sealed him as a messenger of grace. But what language can ever explain the miracle of a soul reborn? Wesley, lifted to the Holy Mount, was endowed with new sensitivities, new faculties and powers. A revealing faith became the eye of his soul, whereby he saw him who is invisible. It became to him a spiritual ear through which he heard the still small voice. On the Mount of Transfiguration, Wesley's spirit took wings to where the heavens rang with praise. There he peered forward, and life's horizons were strangely amplified. The awesome music of choirs celestial flooded his soul. Peace on earth, goodwill towards men was their swelling refrain. The very stars of the firmament reflected now the crystal purity of heaven, where all wills are attuned into harmony with the will divine. Wesley, transfigured, at one with God, surveyed again that heart-warming scene. In the veil of time and sense being for the moment lifted, he envisaged a human society reborn to a spiritual prototype, a society wherein the will of God is done on earth as in heaven. Before him there loomed the city of God, the promised land. Within him was the harmony of a new heaven and a new earth. Wesley, in conversion, glimpsed eternity's strand, and in that new perspective, even former enemies were now his friends in God. Love possessed and transformed his being. Then the veil fell. The material world returned. The air chilled. Wesley looked now with a seer's vision upon the England of his day. It was the England of the slave trader, the kidnapper, the smuggler, the England of trading justices, South Sea bubbles, and commercial cupidity, the England of gin shops, sodden ignorance, and incredible child neglect, the England of bestial sports, mad gambling, and parading wantonness. It was the England of corrupt politics and soulless religion, the England of materialism, dim ideals, and expiring hopes. The contrast to a now hypersensitized soul might seem revolting, but courage never wavered. England, to Wesley, despite her sins, was a land of immortal souls, and henceforth he knew that Christ had given him birth to brother all the souls on earth, according to Masefield's poem. He knew too that he was now commissioned by the Father of all love, mercy, and truth to release England from the bondage of materialism and point her feet into the ways of righteousness. His mission was to restore faith to a faithless people. No longer did doubt corrode his mind. He had groped his way through darkness and pain to the Mount of Transfiguration, where the shackles fell from his soul. No longer had he the faith of a servant, but of a son. His at last was the liberty of an heir of God, anointed to perform a work of mighty deliverance for mankind. May 24th, 1738, was Wesley's spiritual birthday. On that date, the brand plucked out of the burning was impregnated with spiritual fire, that he might set England ablaze for God. The sophisticated would mock, vested interests would persecute, the populace would resist. But this twice-born man henceforth knew his calling. The chains of pedanticism were now snapped asunder. The priest was merged in the prophet. Wesley forthwith was a child of the Spirit. Formality had given place to reality, and from that day till his soul returned to its Maker, 53 years later, the divine light rarely flickered and never failed. Depression and defeat henceforth were strangers to him. His spiritual birthday came exactly 4 months after the agonizing cry, "Oh, who will convert me?" I'll put a link onto the playlist where we started about 40 videos ago.